Hello all, this is the part 2 of chapter 6 on memory. In this video, we will discuss about the cues that may help people remember, reliability of our memory, and forgetting and loss of memory. So if you remember from the part 1 of the video, we discussed about the information processing model, and we mainly covered the first two components, encoding and storage. Today, we will focus on retrieval, which is basically taking information out of the storage, such as our long-term memory. To demonstrate retrieval of information, in the next slide, I will show you a list of words for about 10 seconds, and I want you to remember as many as you can. Are you ready? Here it goes. Time's up. What are some of the words you were able to recall? For you to check the words you were and were not able to remember, I will show you the same list of words again. So check and see which words you missed and which words you were able to remember. Were there any patterns? According to the serial position effect, we tend to recall the beginning and the end more so than in the middle. Was this the case for you? And there is a specific terms for when we tend to better recall the items at the beginning and at the end. Supremacy effect is the effect describing the tendency to better recall the items at the beginning. And the recency effect is the effect describing the tendency to better recall items at the end of the list. So having said that, according to this serial position effect, which chapter should you study the most for exam 1, which is coming up next week? So we covered chapter 1 and then chapter 5, and now we are going over chapter 6. So the answer will be chapter 5, because that is in the middle, where we may not be able to recall as much compared to chapters 1 and 5. In addition to the serial position effect, there are other tendencies where people are more likely to retrieve information. For example, research found that the environment we encode information matters because the information present at the time of the encoding tends to act as a retrieval cue. This is called encoding specificity. So for example, say that you will be taking an exam 1 underwater. According to this principle, it will be best to recall the information at a similar environment where the encoding occurs. In other words, you will likely to better retrieve information if you study underwater as opposed to on the land, because you will be taking the exam underwater. But just on a side note, obviously you will be taking an exam on the land, so no need to study underwater. Another component that will influence through the retrieval of our memories is how much our emotions are associated with our memories. The more emotions are attached with memory, the more likely we are able to recall the event. So this is called flashbulb memories, and common example may be post-traumatic events. However, it could also be positive experiences, such as the time you went on a trip overseas, or when you found out you were admitted to a college. So we are more likely to recall the memories that are associated with our emotion. Although certain things may assist us in retrieving information from our memory, how reliable do you think is our memory? And this question can be especially important in the context of eyewitness testimony. Research has shown that things we see and hear can affect the accuracy of our memories, and these information may actually fill in the gap of our memories. However, there are many researchers who are trying to understand better ways of conducting eyewitness testimony to minimize the error. and Dr. Gary Wells at Iowa State is one of them. And this will be really interesting video clip to watch, especially if you're interested in pursuing a field of forensic psychology. So I will post the link in the description of the video so you can check that out. And when we cannot retrieve information from our storage or our memory, we may simply have just forgotten. So, have there been a time when you woke up in the morning and realized you had homework due that day? Or have there been a time when you connected your flash drive to a public computer and forgot to unplug and lost it? Or locked yourself out of a car? Or you were looking everywhere for your sunglasses and realized that it was on your head? Yes, it all happened to me. The German psychologist named Hermann Ebbinghaus conducted a research on forgetting. He made a list of about 13 nonsense, meaningless syllables, and then he assessed how many an individual was able to remember. So this is what he found. This curve is called Ebbinghaus forgetting curve because he discovered it, and he basically found that forgetting occurs very quickly at the beginning, but then tapers off gradually over time. You can see this trend in the figure where an individual forget roughly about half of the syllables on the list within the first hour. But after that, people tended to retain the remaining information even after 2 days or roughly about a month. It does drop a little bit, but still how the individual forgets is really slow as the time passes by. So this leads to my next question. Based on this forgetting curve, when is the best time to revisit the material you are studying? So for example, say you're trying to memorize a list of words, and obviously right after you studied the list, you probably are able to retain most of the words. But to prepare for a quiz or exam, whatever that might be, you probably need to revisit the list again to prevent from forgetting. So according to this forgetting curve, the best time to revisit the material is about after 30 to 60 minutes, when we start to forget around half of the materials, because after that, there are not much change in the amount of the information we forget. So, by repeating this over and over, we will be able to prevent from forgetting the information and increase the retention rate. So this might be a real useful technique that you could apply to your other classes or this class when you're trying to study for an exam. And here I have another question. There's a lot of activities, questions that we could do in this chapter. I'm pretty sure we have all seen a penny at least once. And which one of this is the actual penny? Don't cheat and start looking for a penny. So what do you say? Are you ready for an answer? If not, you probably should stop this video. So the answer is A. Technically, this is not forgetting per se, but rather this is called encoding failure, which is a failure to process information into memory. What this means is that we really did not store the design of the penny in our memory in the first place. Perhaps because we had no interest in memorizing the detailed design of a penny, as long as we were able to detect that this coin is a penny and not a nickel or a dime. Of course, encoding failure would not happen if we were, for example, looking at our paycheck or a transcript, where we probably will be making sure everything is accurate. There may also be failure in retrieving information from the storage, especially if the information are interfering with each other. This can easily happen to all of you, as I'm assuming that general psychology is not the only class you are taking this semester. So if you are taking multiple classes, the course content from other classes may get in the way of retrieving information. When the older information interferes with the retrieval of newer information, we call that as proactive interference because the newer information is being interfered by the older information. So in this example, you have a psychology test, so you study for psychology right before the exam. But you are also preparing for the biology test before studying for psychology. Because you are studying for psychology after biology, the content you study for biology may interfere with psychology. Again, this is called proactive interference. However, interference does not only occur in this direction, but it can occur in the opposite direction. In retroactive interference, the newer information interferes with the retrieval of the older information. So in this case, you're still going to take the psychology exam, but this time you study for psychology before studying for biology. But when you take the psychology exam, the content you study for biology may interfere with the psychology, which you study before the biology. So either way, whether it is a proactive or a retroactive interference, the content you are wanting to retrieve from your memory is being interfered. But the difference is how the interference is happening. Is it due to the previous content you studied, or is it due to the content you study afterwards? So make sure you don't get these two confused. So to summarize about why forgetting happens, we discussed encoding failure and proactive and retroactive interference. We did not discuss decay or disuse, but the underlying concept is pretty simple. If we do not access the information from our memory storage for a very long period, this information will begin to decay or disappear. So for example, when I was little, I loved playing video games, and there was like a password or like a cheat code where when you enter that, it gives you some additional ability or power. And I used to remember that code by heart. But after not playing that game for a while, I totally forgot what that was. So basically, if you don't use it, you lose it. So that's an example of decay or disuse. Last concept we discussed is amnesia or loss in memory, which typically occurs due to brain damage or disease. There are two main types of amnesia: anterograde amnesia and retrograde amnesia. Anterograde amnesia is a loss of memory from the point of injury or of trauma forward, or the inability to form new long-term memories. Anterograde amnesia is the primary memory difficulty in Alzheimer's disease, but retrograde amnesia could also occur as the disease progresses. So I remember my granddad had an anterograde amnesia, so he had difficulty time forming new memories. But he used to play a board game kind of similar to chess, and his skill of playing that did not change at all, even after being diagnosed with amnesia. So in other words, his implicit memory was pretty intact, even after developing the disease. And retrograde amnesia is a loss of memory from the point of some injury or trauma backwards, or loss of memory from the past. This could also happen due to brain damage or disease. Although the damage to the hippocampus is seen as the most common cause of anterograde amnesia, for retrograde amnesia, damage to different areas of the brain, which does include the hippocampus, are known to be associated with the disease. So, that is all I have for Chapter 6, Memory. We just talked about forgetting, but don't forget that Exam 1 will be made available next week in Canvas. So make sure you take it. So thanks and take care.